welcome back to Self Plays, and this is going to be episode 2 of my Warzone gun guides. And today we are going to be covering the Welgun. I've really liked the Welgun ever since it got introduced into Warzone, but it has picked up a lot more popularity ever since the season 2, and then before it got nerfed. And we are going to be talking about the TDKs of each magazine, some basic stats, some movement stats, and I will be leaving you guys with 2 builds that I like for the Welgun. One is going to be my all-round ADS build, and one is going to be my Hipfire build, as the Welgun is quite decent when it comes to hip firing. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now let's get started with some base stats for the Welgun. And first we're going to talk about our ADS speed, which is at 245 milliseconds, which I would say is okay for an SMG. Our ranges with the Welgun, with the base magazine, might I add, are quite good for an SMG, at 0 to 15 meters being our maximum damage range, then our second damage drop off being at 15-20 meters, and then 20 meters and over being the third damage drop off. Talking about our fire rate, which is at 658 rounds per minute. Now this, some might suggest, is slow for an SMG, but the Welgun has 2 attachments, the recoil booster and a barrel, that both increase our fire rate by 55%. So we can use those attachments individually or together to increase our fire rate if we wanted to. The movement speed is a bit low for an SMG at 4.8 meters per second. The bullet velocity, however, is standard for all Vanguard SMGs in Warzone at 400 meters per second. And now moving on to one of the most important stats of an SMG that I consider being important, the ADS movement. And this is the second slowest Vanguard ADS movement speed for an SMG at 3 meters per second. So we can bump these numbers up using numerous attachments that do improve our movement speed and ADS movement speeds. And we will get into those when we are fixing or we are setting up our gun. Now moving into the magazines that we have, and the first magazine we have is the 7.62 Gorenkos, and the 7.62 Gorenkos only come with a 40 round mag, so you are limited with magazine and you might run into problems if you are using this gun in trios or quads, but I prefer using the 7.62 Gorenkos over the base magazine. Now we have a faster ADS speed with this magazine, which is at 235 milliseconds. Our ranges do take a hit, but they are still fairly decent for SMGs. And our first damage drop off is at 12 meters, the second being between 12 and 16 meters, and 16 over is being our third damage drop off. Our fire rate is significantly increased with this magazine. It's 750 rounds per minute, and we can bump that up even higher with the recoil booster attachment, which I prefer using with this gun. Our movement speed is also increases at 4.9 meters per second, and we have a better hip fire with the Gorenkos compared to the base. Moving on to our final magazine type that we have, this is the third magazine type, which are the .45 ACP rounds. With this we have ADS speed of 230 milliseconds. Our ranges are bumped up to 18 meters, 18 to 24 meters, and 24 meters and over. It does hurt our fire rate at 600 rounds per minute, but this magazine does increase our damage, and we will see how this impacts our TDK in the next slide. Now the movement speed also takes a hit at 4.7 meters per second, and this magazine does worsen our hip fire. So I really don't find a reason to be using this magazine with the Welgun unless and until you actually trying to extend all those ranges and using this gun as sniper support. So now getting into the hip fires with this gun. The first test that I did was the base Welgun, the second is with the 7.62 Gorenko rounds, the third is my Hipfire build with the base magazine, and my fourth is the Hipfire build with the 7.62 Gorenkos. And as you can see, the Welgun is pretty decent when it comes to hip firing with this SMG, so if you want to use this gun as a Hipfire build, I would definitely recommend this, and I will give you my Hipfire build at the end of this video. I did compare this to the MP5 Hipfire build that we are all familiar with, and it does stack up quite nicely against it. You will see some vertical recoil while hip firing this gun, and if you were to control that, it would be quite a tight spread. So looking at the recoil for all 3 magazines with the Welgun, I would say they're all fairly close together. However, the Gorenkos have the least amount of horizontal bounce and also the least amount of vertical spread, but they are all fairly close together, and you cannot go wrong controlling either of these. So now moving on to the most important stats when it comes to guns in Warzone, and those are the TDKs. And the Welgun, I must say, has some amazing TDKs. with the base TTK being 545 milliseconds, and you can lower that even further with the recoil booster attachment to 520 milliseconds. With the Gorenkos, we have a TTK of 560 milliseconds, and you can lower that even further to 530 milliseconds. With the .45 rounds, we have a TTK of 600 milliseconds, and with the recoil booster, it goes down to 570 milliseconds. Now, all these TTKs are amazing. The base absolutely shreds in Warzone, but I should prefer using the Gorenko just because of that faster fire rate and the faster movement in ADS speeds. But you can still get away with using the base magazine and use the 64 round mags for trios and quads. Now, moving on to our builds. The first one is going to be an all-round ADS build that I prefer using with the Welgun, and I'm going to use the recoil booster attachment. For my barrel, I'm going to go with the third barrel, the 320 SA Shrouded. For the underbarrel, I'm going to go with the Carver foregrip. For the recoil control and the Hipfire, I'm going to go with the 7.62 Gorenkos, the subsonic ammunition. The rear grip is going to be the pine tar grip for the recoil control and added hipfire accuracy. Now, for perks, you have a choice. I prefer using fleet or acrobatic, but I like acrobatic more since it also offers sprinting movement speed. So that's the one that I'm going to go with here. But you could also use fleet if you wanted to. And then for our second perk, we're going to go with quick. And the stock that we're going to use is going to be the first stock for the sprint to fire and the movement speed. And I like using the slate reflector with my ADS builds. Now, this is the all-round ADS build that I have for the Welgun. Also, I might know that you can use the 64 round mags if you wanted to. I just prefer using the 7.62 Gorenkos. Now, moving on to my Hipfire build. And for the Hipfire build, I'm going to go with the recoil booster again. For the barrel, I'm going to use the last barrel, which is the 300mm. I'm going to go with the Carver foregrip. For the magazine, again, I would prefer using the 7.62 Gorenkos, but you could use the 64 rounds if you wanted to. Subsonic. For the stock, I'm going to go with the third stock, the Gawain S Custom, for the hipfire accuracy. Now, the perk is going to be Gunko, and Gunko is completely broken, in my opinion, when it comes to Warzone, because it essentially negates all your sprint to fire, so you can just run and gun with this thing and be a complete hipfire monster when it comes to the Welgun. The perk 2 is going to be quick, again the pine tar grip, and this is going to be my hipfire build. You could swap your magazine out for the 64 round mags if you wanted to. I should prefer using these 40 round Gorenkos because of the faster fire rate and the recoil booster and because of the better recoil control, but you could not go wrong either way. Now, these are my two builds for the Welgun, the Hipfire and the ADS. Try them out and see which one you prefer. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, and I will see you all next time.